Hello and welcome to the video. Within this video guide I'm going to show you how to easily test for off flavours in beer using a simple yet very effective method so that you can train your palate and catch problems. I will also go through common off flavours and how to detect them, as well as some cost-effective ways to spike beer to further train your palate without the need for expensive kits. For homebrewers, learning to recognise off flavours is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. So let's get started. So let's start by looking at what are off flavours. Off flavours are unwanted tastes or aromas that creep into beer because of fermentation issues, contamination, or even poor storage. The problem is quite often they're subtle at first. Unless you know what to look for, they can slip right past you, meaning that you're unprepared for a beer that needs to either be drunk very quickly or simply thrown out. Having to throw out a beer is never going to feel good, of course, but the convenience of early warning will allow you to prepare for its replacement as soon as possible. Let's now look at some of the most common off flavours you'll come across and what usually causes them. Diacetyl tastes like butter or butterscotch with a slick mouth feel, often caused by incomplete fermentation or yeast not cleaning up after itself. In many cases this can be avoided quite easily by using yeast nutrients and giving the beer a little more time after fermentation is complete so that the yeast can clean up after itself. Acetaldehyde is detected by green apple or raw pumpkin notes, usually from beer that has pulled off the yeast way too early. You can avoid this by not rushing the fermentation process and by keeping tabs on your fermentation by using a hydrometer to check your specific gravity. If you're in a rush for a beer as soon as possible, then considering using yeast that is known for fast performing, like Voss-Kveik for example. Oxidation leads to cardboard, paper or sherry-like flavours. This is generally caused by having too much oxygen exposure during packaging or storage. Homebrewers who accidentally splash beer into kegs or other types of containers will certainly cause this. See my video on how to easily test for oxidation for much more information, which is also part of this how to easily test video series. Light-struck beer smells like skunk spray. This happens when beer in clear or green bottles usually is exposed to sunlight or fluorescent light. You can easily avoid this by bottling always in brown bottles and keeping them away from direct sunlight, as even brown bottles allow some UV light to come through. If you have ever heard anyone say that the cans are the best packaging, then this is mostly because aluminium cans are the most effective portable container for blocking UV light. DMS will add in a creamed corn, cooked corn or cabbage aroma. This can occur from malt, but these days this is highly unlikely unless you're using unmodified malt, also known as farm malt. The precursor to DMS is SMM, and the levels of SMM in modern malt are incredibly low thanks to the modern malting process. So these days DMS is almost always going to be created during fermentation due to your yeast being highly stressed. This is most likely with lager yeast, and it is usually going to be due to underpitching or a lack of nutrients, and this can also occur when fermentation temperatures are very inconsistent. If you have all of this correct, then great, but if you are using lager yeast, then it is a very good idea to raise your temperature towards the end of fermentation to between 18 to 20 degrees Celsius or 60 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which will help clean up undesirable sulfurous compounds. Then lastly we have the dreaded infection or contamination. This will often bring a bad funk like sourness or vinegar-like twang. This occurs when unwanted bacteria penetrates your beer, caused by wild bacteria, but usually because of poor sanitation if we are being honest. To avoid this, simply keep everything that comes into contact with your beer clean and sanitary. This will most notably be your fermentation vessel and your beer lines if you are serving from a kegerator, and literally anything else that comes into contact with your beer. Clean and sanitary are the first two rules of homebrewing. Let's now look at the best way to detect even the earliest signs of these off flavours. The best way to train your palate is popularly believed to be through comparison. The simple fact is that you only ever taste the off flavour beer, especially in the early stages. Your brain will adapt quickly and it's actually very hard to pinpoint what's wrong. But if you taste it next to a clean sample, the difference quite simply jumps out immediately. To get testing, this is actually very easy to set up. Here is what you will need. A clean reference beer, something light and fairly neutral like a basic lager is ideal. Naturally you'll also need the beer that you are testing, and to be sure serve these in identical glasses. These do not need to be large samples of course, up to you. Just this 2-glass setup alone will work for many, but having an off-flavour source can be very useful for some too. You can buy kits like the one now shown on screen, which has to be said are pretty expensive at over $100 a shot, but the choice is yours of course. Let's now move into the DIY spiking guide before we finish up with some words about comparison. So let's look at a DIY spiking guide now. Now do not misunderstand me, pro kits are great, but if you want a budget friendly option, here are some easy DIY spikes that you can use to simulate common off flavours. Despite being fairly primitive, many people find these spikes very helpful and effective. In doing this, you will use a neutral beer like a basic lager and add to this. To replicate diacetyl with its buttery effect, add just 1 drop of butter extract to a half glass of beer and this will be plenty for reference. To replicate acetaldehyde and its green apple effect, simply add a splash of apple juice. To replicate oxidation, pour some beer into a glass, leave it uncovered at least overnight and then compare it to a fresh pour of the same beer at that point. The difference often shocks people the very first time they try this. For that light-struck skunky effect, take a beer in a clear glass and leave it in direct sunlight, then compare it to one kept in the dark. A beer can become light-struck in as little as 30 seconds in direct strong sunlight, but it can also take minutes to a few hours depending on the intensity of the light. To replicate DMS and its cooked corn effect, a drop of creamed corn juice or canned corn water in your beer works surprisingly well. And then lastly, to replicate an infection and its vinegar effect, add just a drop of white vinegar to mimic sour infected beer. It's not going to be pleasant of course, but it will work well as a budget-friendly reference. Let's now look at the testing process itself. First, smell all of your samples separately. This could be your control beer and just your spiked beer for training, or it could include a beer you want to test too. Our sense of smell is a vital aspect here, as put simply, up to 80% of what we perceive as flavour actually comes from aroma, not taste. Our tongue only detects sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, and also in some cases fat and alkaline flavours. Everything else, which includes buttery, fruity, sulphury, papery and so on, actually comes from volatile compounds detected by the nose. It should also be mentioned that many off flavours also show up in aroma much before they're noticeable in taste or mouthfeel. A well-trained nose can actually catch small flaws early, helping brewers detect issues during fermentation, storage or packaging. By taking in the aroma of each of your samples, your nose is actually the best guide you have. Once you've done the first round of aroma tests, I then suggest that you complete an aroma test and then a taste test of your neutral sample first, before then doing the same with your test sample if applicable, and then end with your reference sample. This can take a little practice, but don't force it. Just notice differences and similarities between the beers. Move back and forth between them if needed. That contrast makes it so much easier to pick up the buttery, papery or sour notes that define off flavours. If you have any questions, then do not hesitate to let me know. Also, please do share your thoughts about this topic and also this video within the comments section on YouTube. I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support, you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel, then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!